Good morning, evening, or afternoon, everybody. It is me, your boy TPT, coming at you, not live and not from Twitch TV. I hope you all are having a fantastic day today. Obviously, we will be continuing our advanced EU4 guides videos. Now, before we do jump into it, obviously I've got a couple things to say. First of all, on the recommendation of a friend of mine, I have increased the bitrate of my recordings to 25,000. So if there is a noticeable increase in quality, I would actually love it if you guys could tell me. Because I think it will quite improve the quality of the videos and just make them look a lot nicer in general. Obviously, I will still be streaming in around 5K. Also, as usual, I have to give my shout outs to the EU4 Australia and EU4 Casuals Discords. They're pretty cool places to hang out, very active, and in fact, sometimes they do more than just EU4 as well. EU4 Casuals is mainly for Americans and Europeans, whereas EU4 Australia is obviously for Australians. So be sure to check them out. As long as you stay away from the politics channel, you should be just fine. Anyhow, we are going to be continuing our second video on how battles function. Now, I have a few things to explain in this video regarding, obviously, how battles function. Because I wasn't able to cover everything in the previous video. So I will just, explain how it works. So there's a few things we'll be covering. We'll be covering how the combat phases work. Oh, sorry, combat sequences, should I say, with shock and fire. Deployment. And also how the shattered retreat functions work, at least to an extent, because you can't entirely predict them, but there is a relative pattern in which they follow. So, first of all, I reckon we should discuss just something relatively simple, which is how combat sequences function. So, as you probably know by this point, the game is divided up into two phases. The first is fire and the second is shock phase. They both last for 3 days each. So you'll have 3 days of shock, 3 days of fire, and then 3 days of shock, 3 days of fire, 3 days of shock, and after those 4 periods, that's also when that's also the time frame in which you're able to stack wipe enemy armies. So it's another one of the reasons why artillery is actually good in the late game. People don't actually realize this, but a bonus of obviously artillery being good in the late game is because of the fact that the fire phase happens first before the shock phase. And so if we look at these numbers, all right, you've got 1.6 fire, 1.65 infantry shock, 4.4 and 0.35. So say we have 10 of each, okay? It's not the greatest stat composition, but let's just say we have 10 of each, okay? So with that, in the fire phase, you're doing 1.6 plus 4.4 divided by 2, because if you don't know, cannons only inflict half of their damage from the back row. So that is, so realistically this number is actually half of what it is. Although again, it's straight damage, so it's still really good, and you don't need to worry about that too much. But the other one is obviously 0.65 plus 0.35 divided by 2. And if you look, so in fire you're doing 3.8, and in shock you're doing 1.825. So if you have a cannon advantage on the enemy and they have cavalry, for example, then you will be the first person to gain the advantage. And obviously that matters because the strength of a unit changes the amount of kill casualties and morale damage that is received by the enemy armies. And so because of that, having the fire phase first is just another one of the big reasons why artillery is so good in the late game, especially compared to something like cavalry, who again pretty much has like not much fire, especially considering they're about 3 times the price of infantry. Well, it's like 2.5, but you get the idea. Anyway, so next thing I want to cover is deployment. So I probably won't go too much into detailed deployment because it is actually... So deployment is similar to morale damage in the sense that nobody actually knows how it works, not even Paradox. However, there is a general structure which has been largely agreed upon through playtesting and theory, as well as, playtesting and practice. And as such, there is a particular, sort of idea about generally how it works, which is there's actually it's believed to have two separate algorithms to an extent, which is one is an army with less than the combat width, and the second is an army with more than the combat width. Well, there is sort of a third one which is equal to, but it's mostly the same as the first one. So anyway, so what'll happen is, let's just get in a fight, alright? So I can sort of see if I can show you guys pretty much how it works. This is why I actually declared this war specifically, so I could just run my troops into these fools. Okay, here we go. Okay, so you'll see here, this is more or less what we have here. Now, the first thing that it prioritizes is infantry, which is, so we'll go with the smaller armies that don't cover the entirety of the combat width. I don't believe this army quite covers the combat width. I think it's got a little, so it's 30. This one's, so obviously there's a couple on each side that it doesn't quite cover. It's about 4. So generally, obviously we don't know exactly why everything happens, like why there's artillery on the far side, instead of just placing it here for extra damage against the infantry. But, so first it'll place the infantry, then it will deploy as much cavalry on the sides as it can, before deploying all the artillery it can in the second row. Unless there's obviously more artillery than there's infantry, then it will deploy the infantry in the first row until both rows are even, before then putting all of the remaining artillery in the second row. And then once that's done, if there is still space remaining in the second row, then they'll actually deploy cavalry behind here for unknown reasons, because they don't actually do damage from that point. Now, if you'll note, the cavalry is unfortunately not great optimization, because they'll always put an additional infantry unit to the right of the cavalry. So realistically, an optimal deployment would have this cavalry be one further out, as that would allow this infantry to then attack 2, and the cavalry would still get its flanking bonus on 3. But obviously it doesn't get as much of a flanking bonus this way, which is why people aren't really sure why it does that. It's not supposed to, but it does. Because it's Paradox, and again, no one actually really knows how it even works in the first place. This is mainly based off of theory and practical application. So the second option is, for a bigger army, which is they'll place as much infantry as they can in the first row, up to a particular position, like, except for a relative number of positions on either side. Then they deploy all the cavalry on obviously the flanks of that. They will then deploy the artillery starting in the central battle line. So they'll deploy the artillery starting from this center point around here. Then they deploy more infantry if they can. So they'll try and deploy, so say here, they'll deploy infantry along here and here. And then once that's all been completed, then they'll actually deploy more cavalry on the far edges of here. Because despite the fact that they don't do damage from the second row, the game still wants them to be there anyway. And so because of that, it forces them to be. Because it tries to get as many units in combat as is possible. And it's not optimized. In fact, it's frankly, most people actually quite dislike it because of how poorly optimized it is. You know, like if you had this cannon back here, it could be doing damage to these. Same with this one. If you drop this cavalry over here, it could make better use of its flanking range, but it doesn't. People aren't really entirely sure why that's the case, other than that it is. And it's very commonly accepted to be the case. It's not like something that just happens occasionally. It happens pretty much every time. You'll see. Look at this. 3 cannons. See, this one doesn't matter as much because you can't get in here. But again, cavalry. Why is there, you know, there's that one extra infantry, which is hitting this one unit. If you move the cavalry over 1, you get a larger flanking bonus. Again, why it doesn't do that, we don't really know, but it just fucking does. Like, that's all I can really say. It just does. You know? And the last thing I do want to cover is how shattered retreating works. So when an army loses enough morale in order to be disorganized, so you know, where they're doing a shattered retreat instead of a controlled one. So for example, you know, if I was like click here, they'd retreat. You know, if it wasn't a shattered retreat, they just retreat there. But if it was, then there's actually a number of particular requirements for a province to be preferred to be retreated to. So there's three main requirements, on top of the fact that obviously they have to own it, except, you know, if there's like fort mechanics that can occasionally not occur, but typically they have to own it. And the other 3 requirements are high development, a fort, and no adjacent enemies. Those are the 3 things that the AI looks for. Not just the AIs in other nations. I mean the AI is in the actual, you know, your infantry, you know, your armies as well. It looks for is high development, fort, and no adjacent enemies. And that's one of the big reasons why you can see these retreat marches. You know, like, I might retreat from this battle and I'll end up in fucking Constantinople. You know, the reason for that is because it's a high development province with a fort and no adjacent enemies. You know, whereas you think, oh, why doesn't it just retreat to there? You know, like say Elam, it probably actually would retreat to this one, but say, why does it retreat to Elam? Well, it's not high development. You know, even though it has a fort, it's not high development. This one is, and so it will favor retreating to here over to here. And so, to an extent, you are able to predict, you know, how you know, and where the enemy armies will retreat to, as well as your own. And yeah, the problem with that is the fort mechanics can really mess with that, the zone of control mechanics, should I say. And so because of that, you can end up just retreating one province and getting snack rights quickly after. Because when you... So, just sort of put this a little bit on the end. When a battle concludes, the winning army will be provided 50% of their maximum morale, and retreating from a battle will reduce the other allied armies' morale relative to the number of troops leaving that engagement. So say, for example, I have 100,000 allied troops in this battle, and I retreat 10k. Then the remaining troops will lose 10% of their remaining morale. It doesn't actually matter how much morale my troops have, they'll lose 10%. You know? So they'll never lose less than than the proportion of your troops. So say, for example, your troops only have 5% morale. You know, like say your troops only have 5% of the total morale. Those retreating troops will still take away 10%. You know, and they can't have more than 10% of that group of of that group of troops morale. And so because of that, it is objectively bad for the morale to retreat, because you will always lose out, you know, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, and it's entirely possible for those troops to take out more than their relative morale if it's, when it's being based off of numbers. So say, for example, your troops have like 3 morale, alright? But these troops here only have 2.5. Well, you retreat these troops out, boom, you're still going to lose 10%. You're still going to lose 0.3 instead of 0.25. You're still going to lose it. And so because of that, again, it's not good practice to retreat from a battle before it is over. Unless, of course, again, you're coordinating with your allies, because otherwise those allies, if there's enough of a discrepancy between the remaining morale, my apologies, and the troops there, then they will instantly be shadow retreated, and there's nothing they can do about it. And so that's why when you're in a multiplayer war, coordinating your retreats, if you decide to retreat, which you realistically normally shouldn't anyway, but coordinate retreats when deciding a retreat will also save you both men, because they won't be suffering. If you pull out like half your army, they won't lose like half of this thing and just get absolutely obliterated by a full combat with stack. And they also obviously won't, they'll be able to, they won't get to shadow retreat. They'll be able to actually choose where they retreat as well. So it's something good to know. Plus, also keep in mind, even when an army is shadow retreating, it still replenishes morale as normal. So it does gain its normal standard monthly tick of morale even when it's shadow retreating, which is why you'll see like those fights where you'll have like a fight of a relatively even sized army. They'll retreat, you'll go to attack him. They'll actually defend, then they'll retreat over here. You'll go to attack him. You can't stack wipe him because they've gained some morale back. And you'll just be stuck in this, perpetual game of ping pong. It happens way too often for Comfort as well. And it's because of the fact that they can still gain morale. It's really irritating if you ask me. It's super annoying. Look, anyway guys, I've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to in this video, so I do hope you have enjoyed. If you did, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Be sure to hit that like, give me that sweet YouTube algorithm dosh. I obviously do plan on releasing more of these, though my next few will probably focus on economics rather than military tactics, as I believe I've covered most of what I want to I believe I've covered most of what I want to regarding battles so far. I might make an extra little video about some more of the multiplayer specifics, but I've pretty much covered everything I want to. So, also be sure to join the Discord, join the stream down below. I go live about 4 to 5 times a week, same time every day, 8 PM Australian Eastern Standard Time. If you've got any questions, or you can always use the comment section. the YouTubes, you know, or the Discord or Twitch. Even if I'm not streaming EU4, feel free to ask away. Catch you guys next time. Peace.